Okay, I think we can begin. Good amount of questions. One of the qualities of a good meditator on the Buddhist path is the ability to question everything. So definitely continue to question. It's a good thing. Oh, wow, this is a hardball right off the bat. Is there any distinction between mind, consciousness, and awareness? Jeez. Well, you know, this is actually something that I've been kind of researching a lot on my own. Also, not only what the Buddha said about these things, but also what current science is saying about these things, and what you know, people are debating about, and this kind of stuff. And for the most part, most people won't even touch consciousness. Most scientists won't touch it because it's something that's very hard to quantify, to study. But in terms of consciousness, what the Buddha taught of consciousness, I can talk about that. The Buddha taught of consciousness only within the relation of our senses. What is the definition of consciousness? Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness. That is consciousness in Buddhism. Consciousness arises only with name and form. Consciousness and name and form arise together. You can't have one without the other. So when name and form is the mentality and the materiality. And so I'm going a little bit into dependent origination when I'm talking about here. So consciousness, along with what we call namarupa, name and form, is what constitutes the five aggregates: form, feeling, mental perception, mental formations or volitional formations, and consciousness. So they all are a package deal. They all come together. And you know, when the five khandhas, when the five aggregates at the death of the body are done, then consciousness is also done, because consciousness is dependent on that psychophysical organism. So according to the Buddha, that's consciousness. Now mind's a tough one, right? Now, of course, in science and in modern society, people debate what mind is. Some people say that it's completely and utterly materialistic, i.e. everything in mind can be somehow explained by neurons and stuff like that. I was actually just watching a wonderful video by a neuroscientist called Steven Pinker, who basically was explaining why he feels that that is the case. Then of course, in Buddhism, at least in the four Nikayas, what we teach here, what we consider to be the oldest and the closest to the original words of the Buddha. In the Nikayas, what the Buddha talks about the mind in terms of what goes on, people have this question like what exists after death, or what goes to the next body. The Buddha was not very, he didn't really care about all these kind of metaphysical details. He didn't explain all these things because he said that they were not conducive to the goal. But one thing that I was able to read, and like I said, I've read thousands of pages of it, and I saw one instance where the Buddha talks about the mind, the body being eaten by animals and decaying, and the mind moving forward. So, I guess at least in that regard, you can think of the mind as not directly connected to the body or the Namarupa. Other than that, I don't know if I can really get more detailed without probably saying a lot of BS that's probably not anywhere near true. So I think, yeah, that's pretty much the limit. But I guess awareness, you have to have consciousness for your to have awareness, right? If you're not conscious, you're not going to be aware. So awareness is dependent on consciousness. What is the difference in closing one's eyes while meditating versus keeping them open? I've never really heard a monk or a teacher say, oh, this is the difference between the two, or you should do one or the other regarding that. And I've heard, if people had certain issues with visualizations and stuff like that, I've heard monks say, try to open your eyes, or for different specific reasons. They'll say, try to meditate with your eyes open. And maybe different traditions, they talk about having your eyes very little open and try and focusing on a point. I don't really have much experience or knowledge regarding that with the eyes open regarding sitting meditation. Obviously it's a prerequisite for walking meditation, right? You're not really supposed to walk with your eyes closed because you have to be able to see what's in front of you. So you're always walking with your eyes open. And I guess to extrapolate on that, when you're doing something with your eyes open, there's more of a chance or more of a tendency to be distracted by things in the environment, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The Buddha gives a couple different benefits to walking meditation, and one of them is that the concentration from walking meditation that you develop is durable, meaning that it's strong. When it comes to you, it's not easily pushed away, as opposed to if you close your eyes and every little sound or everything, if you don't do walking meditation, every little thing can bug you. But when you're walking meditation, your eyes are wide open. Like when I used to do my practice, I would practice at my office before work. So I would practice on the sidewalk by my office, and there would be cars going by and bugs and all kinds of animals and people driving by and all kinds of stuff. And it really made a difference in my practice that I could, I for the first time I was able to just totally focus and have that stuff not bother me or not affect me. It was amazing. So wow, this actually works. This is good stuff. So, and I guess, in terms of, meditating with your eyes open, while you're sitting, if that's something that you do, you're not only following your object of meditation, but you're also going to, I guess, practice concentrating with all kinds of other things that are going to go into your field of view. How is the desire for enlightenment different from simply a deep-rooted aversion to suffering? Well, I guess one thing I will say in terms of, I'll talk about this aversion to suffering. When we talk about this practice and developing this practice, and we talk about developing a disenchantment with, sensual pleasures and things like that, we're not talking about an aversion. We're not talking about the world sucks. This sucks, that sucks. I'm going to go be a monk and become awakened. That's not how it works. The aversion to the world is just as much of a hindrance as an attachment to the world. They're both from the root of craving. They're both wanting the world to be something, or wanting our experience to be something different than what it actually is. Right? They're both our expectations for the world. So a desire for awakening comes more from essentially a disenchantment. It's not that you don't like something, it's just like that it just doesn't attract you anymore, it doesn't keep your attention anymore. The Buddha uses a wonderful simile of a sandcastle. As long as children are excited and enveloped and enjoying, and they're making the sandcastle, then they're going to like it, and they're going to be attracted to it, and they're going to take care of it and all this stuff, and they're going to be attached to it. But once they're done with it, they don't care about it anymore. They've moved on to something else. It's just like a child with a toy, right? They have a toy for a certain amount of time. I'm done with that toy, and then they go to another toy. It's not that they hate the toy. It's just that it just doesn't matter to them anymore, or it doesn't matter as much. So when you start to get into the point in your practice where you develop this disenchantment, you don't hate the world, you don't dislike it. Really, it's more of an acceptance, right? And you understand human nature, you understand the world, and you don't feel like you need to be wrapped up in it anymore. You don't feel like you need to be attached to it. And of course, the great thing about the Buddha in this practice is that he found a way out. He says, if you're up to the point where you're done, well, there's this thing called nibbana, and here's how to get to it. So there's a huge difference between it being an aversion. It's not an aversion to suffering. It's an understanding of suffering, and it's a disenchantment, because you start to see that everything. It's not the definition of dukkha being, or the first noble truth being that everything is suffering. Initially, it doesn't sound very nice, does it? It sounds very pessimistic. It sounds very so when people say, "Oh, Buddha said, everything is suffering." Technically, he didn't, but in a way, when you start to see deeply, you do see that everything inherent in existence is some kind of dukkha, right? Because everything is impermanent. And so when you let go of attaching to these impermanent things, you're letting go of your craving. And when you let go of your craving, when your craving is gone, there's nothing to keep you going in this round of existence. And you're done. You go out just like the lamp. So there's a difference. Aversion is just as much mired in craving as attachment. Is there any danger in practicing meditation vigorously without following a specific teaching or having an experienced teacher? Yes and no. In Theravada, we're not. Having a teacher is not necessarily something that's absolutely 100% totally needed. In Theravada, what we stress is what the Buddha stressed. The Buddha said that he was the best kalyanamita, the best spiritual friend. Right? And what a spiritual friend is somebody who encourages you on the path. They encourage you doing good things. They encourage you, eradicating unskillful qualities and habits in your mind. And oftentimes they kind of act as a guide. Maybe they're a little bit further down the path than you. So maybe they have a little bit more experience, and they can, if you have a question or something like that, they can answer that, or, guide you in a certain direction. But they're not saying, this is how you practice. The Bhante Ji is a perfect example of this. He's not like, okay, you're a monk, you do X, Y, this, and this, and this, and this. No, Bhante Ji is, okay, you're a monk, you know what to do. If you need me, if you have any questions, here I am. Right? He's not telling you, he's not guiding, he's not controlling you, he's not leading your life. He's there as a spiritual friend, a very good one. If you have any questions or if you need guidance, he's there. So if you don't have that, it's okay. I have been meditating 10 years, over 10 years now. The far majority of that, I was the only Buddhist I knew in my daily life. I had no Sangha near me. I had no monks. I had no teachers. But I practiced. I mean, luckily, we have the internet today. So thankfully, I was able to go on YouTube. There's tons and tons of videos of monks, talking. Now, even we're on YouTube now. So, there's very, very, all the great Dhamma that you can find. You can find it on YouTube. So, there's a lot of people that have that experience of they're the only Buddhist they know in their daily life. So, and I was one of them. I don't think it harmed my practice. Maybe if I had, a Bhante Ji or somebody closer to me, maybe it would have helped. It might have. And this is not saying that if you have a spiritual friend, or if you have somebody who you can learn from, not to learn from and just say, okay, I'm going to go off on my own. But this is what I'm trying to say is that if you don't, it's okay too. Some people kind of have this feeling like, I don't have a teacher, that means I shouldn't practice, I don't know what I'm doing, all these kind of things. The Bhante Ji says there's only one teacher. He's not a teacher. He'll tell you that. He says, I'm not your teacher. The teacher is the Buddha. The Buddha is the teacher. In Theravada, most monks, they will say that. The greatest teacher is the Buddha. And so, when you, if you're a lone practitioner, one of the best things to do is to gradually get into learning from the Nikayas. Learning what did the Buddha say about how did he teach, meditation and what he did. And you guys are here learning about the Noble Eightfold Path. That's great. That's a very good, aspect of that. So the more I found in my own practice, being by myself and learning from the internet and I was very happy. It's almost about 5 years ago now. About a little bit more than halfway into my 10 years that I've said, I was able to find bhavana. And I lived 5 hours away. I'm originally from New Jersey, so it's not like I could just stop by and say hello to Bhante Ji, whenever I wanted. It's one of those things that I could come once or twice a year for a retreat and then come visit when I could and gather what wisdom I could from everybody here. So I wouldn't say that there's a danger to it. I would say though that you do have to, you're not relying on somebody else, you have to rely on yourself. You have to really, like I was talking about before during the talk, about finding your own theme, about understanding your own practice, understanding yourself. You have to be that, you have to take that responsibility for that in your own practice. It's the same, like when I first started practicing and I really didn't know what I was doing. I had very basic information and I started practicing a certain way, and the basic information you always get is, sit cross your legs, sit straight, sit up, follow your breath, all this stuff. And I'd be following that, and I couldn't do any of it. I was horrible at following my breath. I was horrible at sitting straight for more than X amount of minutes. I was horrible at this, and I got so negative about it. And it's just like, it got to the point where meditating was actually harming me more than it was helping me, and I quit. So yes, there is a point. Your meditation, depending on how you're doing it and what it's doing to your mind, it could be a harm. But a year and a half later, I went back to it, and I said, I know there's a benefit to this. I want to try it again, and it all kind of clicked with me. I found good monastics who were teaching me, talking about, and again, this is all online. At that point, I had not known about bhavana. I'd never met a monk at that point. This was pretty early. But I found a lot of good stuff online, a lot of monks teaching, talking about being kind to your mind and body and stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, I know, it was almost like the Sona Sutta, like I talked to you guys before today about. It was like I went all out and I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, and I overdid it. And I became too negative. And then I learned how to balance. I learned how to be kind to my mind and body. And I came back and I said, you know what, however long I'm going to sit, however long my mind and body allows me to sit is what I'm going to sit. And in the beginning it was like 2 or 3 minutes. And that over time, consistently doing this, developed a consistent practice, and here I am today. So, don't rely on a teacher if you don't have one to start practicing. Start practicing. Use the internet. Listen to Dhamma talks on the internet. I would do that in lay life. I listen to a Dhamma talk every morning before work a lot of times. There's so much resources available for you, and also come here. You've all been here, and I'm sure all of you have some of you are maybe an hour away, some of you are 7 or 8 hours away. So, your ability to come here will be determined on, by how far away you are and all that stuff. But if you can come to a place, it's very good to come to a place like this to kind of reinvigorate your practice, right? When you're out in the world for a certain period of time, I noticed this, like I would leave from a meditation retreat and I'd be all like blissed out. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then like 2 months later, I noticed myself like, oh man, I'm craving this and I'm craving that, and it's like everything I learned just like was gone. But then I'd come back to bhavana for like a weekend or whatever, and then it would ground me again, and I'd go back out. So it's almost like you're coming here to get medicine, and then you can go back out and fight the power, I guess. I don't know. Fight tomorrow. But if you can have somebody who's experienced, if you can talk to them, great. If not, be your own teacher. The Buddha said, be your own island, be your own refuge. Have the Dhamma be your refuge. You are there, and the Dhamma is there, in book form and on the internet. And also, when you can get to places like this. But don't wait for a teacher to come out of the sky to start your practice and to do your practice well. The old familiar quote that says, "It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," does not seem to hold true in Buddhism. Why? I don't know if I necessarily believe that. So the Buddha, when the Buddha taught about this practice, where he taught about understanding the gratification, the danger, and the escape of things. What does that mean? You understand the positive aspects of it. You understand why that leads to your attachments. You understand the dangers of that, and you understand how to escape from that, right? So you're understanding all aspects of things. You're not saying, Buddha says, don't love anybody, I'm non-attached, I'm going to go away. That's not how it works. You understand, like if you have family, if you have children, if you have a spouse, you have, an attachment. You have people that you love. That's okay. That's part of living a household life. Now, this is interesting because I'm trying to think of this. I actually was married 10 years ago. She died 10 years of cancer 10 years ago. So I understand love and loss. I understand that. I don't know how this would, work in terms of Buddhist practice. I mean, it's not that it's better not to love anybody. It's just better that if that's part of your experience, then through this practice, you understand that eventually it's going to end, one way or the other. There's 5 subjects of contemplation that the Buddha exhorts all of us to do: monk, layperson, male, female, it doesn't matter who. The first one is that we are subject to old age and decay, and we're not exempt from that. We're subject to illness and disease, and we're not exempt from that. We're subject to death, and we're not exempt from that. And everybody, when they see these, they're like, oh yeah, I understand that. Of course, the next one is the one they don't like. Everything that is pleasing to you, you will be separated from, right? Everything, people, places, experiences, everything that you love, you will be separated from. It's just simple fact of life. It's impermanence. It's just the way you get married. One of a couple things will happen. Statistically, you'll probably get divorced. If you make it, one of you might die. If you make it all the way to the end and you're all like 90 and you're one of those cute old couples that are like walking together and holding hands, you're gonna die anyway. So it's and some people can say this, like, oh yeah, some people can say, well, that's what's gonna happen. I'm not gonna bother with this anyway. And then maybe they become monks. I don't know. But I don't know if I'm answering this question any good or what I'm doing with this question. But I'm trying to grapple with it. But I think it's just, any kind of experience that we have, it's about being grateful for that experience. Like, yes, I was married. Yes, she died. And we went through some years of cancer treatments and all this kind of stuff. I'm extremely grateful for that experience. I don't deny it. I don't wish it never happened. I'm extremely grateful for that experience because it was an amazing experience. She was not the first and not the last of people that I watched die and people who I watched, deal with cancer and stuff like that. It's very prevalent in my family. I've, grandparents, both of my parents are cancer survivors at this point. So I've seen this stuff and, throughout my life. And, sometimes people might think that experiences like that will make you like very pessimistic and very bitter. But for me, it's been the opposite. It's been an amazing, gratitude-filled life so far. And that, probably had an effect of me wanting to become a monk in general, just being able to see, the five subjects of contemplation. I saw them. I don't have to repeat it to myself. I saw it through multiple times throughout my life. So that led me to having what we call nibbida, or disenchantment. And so I said, okay, well, I think there's a better way, and I'm going to go for it. And so, yeah. I don't know. How do we know when the workplace is toxic and we should quit versus when we should look within and fix/change our perception mind? I don't think there's any workplace or living arrangement that is not going to be stressful, that's not going to have, burdens, that's not going to, there's no such thing as living in a house, living in a place with people. Even us monks living here, You know, it's not all like happy, we're all holding hands and running around on the hills and all that kind of stuff. There's, you know, stuff that comes up, and we have, you know, personalities, and you know, we butt heads sometimes. And it's part of being with other people. It's just, so, you know, you're going to have all of these issues, you know, at work. It's just the way it is, because you're working with lots of people, and, you know, depending on, there's various stresses depending on the type of job and stuff like that. I would say that it's very hard or near impossible to change your workplace. It's just kind of like with the world itself. Like, you know, you can go out and put all kinds of effort and try to change the world, but the world is really human nature, and human nature hasn't changed in thousands, or well, actually, it's never changed. In millions, since humans have existed, it's never changed. Everything happening now is happened during the Roman times. Human nature is human nature. So I think it's, no matter what situation, even if it's a positive situation, having, observing our perceptions and our expectations is very important. Because really, if we have expectations for a certain experience, a certain place, as soon as those expectations are not met, we're going to suffer. One of my favorite quotes I first heard from a monk called Ajahn Brahm. He says that suffering is asking from the world what it can't give you. Okay? And if you're asking a workplace, you know, for a workplace to be perfect, and I don't have to worry about all this and that, it's not going to give you that. It's just the way it is. Now, I would say, I guess, if there's a certain point where if it's really affecting you, your mind and your body, and you really just, it's so negative and so harmful that, you know, you can't, you know, no matter what wisdom and experience you have as a meditator, you know, you just, it totally harms you, then maybe it is time to, you know, look for another job. And of course, most people probably don't have that luxury, right? They're probably like, you know, I need this job. You know, getting another job is going to be really hard. So most people probably have to try to find a way to kind of live with it, you know, kind of understand. But I think that without a doubt, for you at least, you can control your own suffering in this situation. No matter what other people do to you, you know, you can allow yourself to not be controlled. You can allow yourself to not be, you know, steamrolled over, all these kind of things. Like my career was, before I came here, was Child Protective Services. It was a very, very stressful, very crazy job. I worked with 100 women, and there was about me and like 6 or 7 other guys. And it was a really interesting experience working there. There was a lot of stuff. I mean, people were always either angry at the courts or the government or this or that or whatever, you know, in my work, because there was always somebody to blame. And even in between, like just working, sometimes, you know, you'd wonder like, well, how did this person even get this job, and all these kind of things, and you know, how did this person become a supervisor over me? And you can't control any of that. I mean, you have a limited amount to control. You can talk to supervisors and stuff like that, but you know, if it's really something that totally affects your mind and body to the point that you don't even want to go there anymore, maybe you should quit. Or maybe, or at least, no, well, maybe I'll rephrase that. Try to find another job before you quit. I'm forced to lay on my back more than I would like to. Sounds like me lately, but thankfully that's only temporary. Due to back pain in regular daily life. Do you have any tips for laying meditation, e.g. legs flat or bent at knees so feet are flat, etc.? Oh, that's a tough one. You know, actually I was just reading an interesting a very big overview of meditation postures and stuff like that. I'd never seen this before, but for laying meditation, what they had suggested was actually having your knees up. So your leg's not totally flat, you're actually bent. So your knees are up when you're laying down. I think that might have to do with probably being a little bit more uncomfortable so you don't fall asleep. There's also a suggestion of doing the laying down meditation in what we call the lion posture. If you ever seen like the Buddha kind of like on his side going like this, that's the lion posture. That is actually a legitimate meditation posture, lying on your side. I don't know if that would help or hurt your back, but I guess one of the suggestions I would also say is do it maybe like when you just wake up, or or after a nap or something like that. Don't do it if you're going to have a real tendency to fall asleep. Do it when you're wide awake. If you have time, it's often something that meditators do is they'll meditate first thing in the morning. Well, if you're meditating lying down, it's pretty easy. You just wake up. You don't even have to move. You can meditate right there. You don't have to get into any positions. You just, Yeah, I think that's all I can say about that. You mentioned that some thoughts were easier to put under the microscope while not on the cushion. How do you decide which thoughts to examine while meditating and which to consider at another time? Well, you can examine your thoughts while you're meditating too. It's just that there's extra levels of mind that are at work when you're you're noticing, okay, this thought leads to my affliction. This thought does this. Kind of like, and I guess the reason I say this is I almost kind of, in a way, made it a mantra. I mean, I actually kind of went exactly from the writing, and I said, oh yes, this thought does lead to my affliction. I can see that it leads to my affliction. This thought, it has taken me away from being calm and meditative and stuff like that. So, and that's kind of a little harder to do while you're trying to sit down and meditate. When at least when I practice and how I practice meditation, when you're observing, you're trying to not put a lot of extra thought processes into it. We don't teach here noting, thinking, all these kind of things. We're trying to just totally observe the experience in as raw and as equanimous an ability that you have to observe that experience. And what I mean by equanimous is, some people say objectively observe your experience, and I don't necessarily know if I like that word, because it's all subjective, right? There's really nothing in meditation that is objective. But what they really mean by that is observing it with an equanimous mind, a mind that's not like you're observing a thought, and what usually happens from that thought, right? You come up with a judgment. I like this thought. I don't like this thought. So you're adding these levels, right? I like, I dislike. As opposed to when you're equanimous, it's just a thought, and I can just observe it. I'm not adding in extra levels of judgment to it. I'm not adding anything to it. I'm just totally mindful, fully aware, clearly comprehending this thought just in itself. And that's why in the what Bhante Mangal is going to talk about tomorrow is the 4 frames of reference, the Satipatthana Sutta, observing mind as mind, body as body, feeling as feeling, mind objects as mind objects. So it's you don't want to add a bunch of extra levels to it. Now I guess I will say though, as I got better at it, I was able to not have to put so many of the words to it. So, but yeah, I guess that's why, that's what I meant when I said this. Yeah. Is there any disrespect in wearing the robe and practicing monkhood, i.e. following the monk's rules, even if one is not a monk or cannot live in a monastery? Well, you know, I mean, anybody can put on a robe. You know, if this is something that you really wanted to do, I would highly suggest not, you know, at least not trying to portray yourself as a monk outwardly to other people. I mean, you know, and if you wear a robe, try not to wear a robe that looks too much like, you know, in a way, it's kind of like, there's this thing, like in the military, there's this thing called stolen valor, right? And it's like these people who you can go online and just buy a uniform and medals and put yourself, all this kind of stuff, and portray yourself as a veteran, right? You can also go online and buy robes, or you can even make robes. It's that we're making, you know, robes for Bhante Ji right now. The young monks were sewing it together and all that stuff. So it's not that hard to do that. I mean, anybody can just kind of buy robes online and put robes on. I think it's more of a matter of portraying yourself to society. You know, you don't want to deceive anybody in society that, you know, you are, you know, are a Buddhist monk or a Catholic monk or whatever, you know, practice that you would practice. Although, in general, I do feel that human beings went the wrong way when we put on pants and tight shirts. I'm telling you, there's nothing better than wearing a robe. Our ancestors did it. Wonderful Dhamma talk. Thank you for discussing effort. Will it be on the website later? I don't know. It depends on Bhante Ji. Like I have my own, you know, stuff that I put my talks on my own channel and all that, but anything that goes on the official Bhavana channel has to go through Bhante Ji first. So, you know, if once Bhante Ji approves it, you know, anything. Obviously, he has us, you know, young monks here, you know, practicing and doing talks and stuff like that, so that we can get the experience, and it's been actually very positive. You know, it's like, I think to myself, it's like, well, why wouldn't anybody just want to listen to Bhante Ji? But like, people are like, oh, this is really interesting. They'd like to hear the different, you know, perspectives and stuff like that. And so, so yeah, I think, you know, you should be able to, you know, one thing I will say is that our internet here is really, really bad. So we actually have people upload the stuff off, you know, outside in society where there's actual, like, normal internet. So, you know, so it's one of those things where any videos that we have on the Bhavana channel, and the last day I'll post up all the social media and the YouTube channel and all that, you know, all that stuff is on there, but it takes a while to get on there. Pretty much every retreat in the last year and a half is up on the YouTube channel now. All the Dhamma talks and the Q&As and all that. Occasionally in the suttas you hear of spirits and other worlds, etc. Was the Buddha simply speaking in words people of the time could understand, or is there real belief in supernatural and Buddhism? Well, you know, it's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily call it supernatural, because it's technically all part of samsara, right? If it's part of samsara, it would be its nature. Samsara is the nature of the existence that we live in. So, I mean, is this in the suttas, and did the Buddha teach this? Yeah. You know, the Buddha taught that there's various beings, you know, And he taught that, there's different levels of existence. There's various hell realms and heaven realms and human and animal realms and all these kind of things. But he also taught that there's many worlds, and there's the world systems, millions and billions of world systems. So he's talking about, the universes and beings on these, universes and all this kind of stuff. And it's quite interesting. If you follow astronomy and astrophysics and stuff like that, you might know of this thing called the multiverse, right? It's not something that they can physically prove now. It's not something that you can do testing on. But the greatest mathematical minds are doing the math, and they're saying, well, this is probably what it is, even though we can't prove it. So the multiverse is many, many universes, tons and tons of universes, all kinds of beings. Even in this universe, don't even worry about other universes. Imagine the different kinds of beings that could exist, right? So we just don't know. And what I find best in this kind of situation is just to kind of remain open-minded about it. Like when we practice metta, it's not like may only beings that I think are in existence have my happiness. It's all beings. So it doesn't matter what being, if they exist, if they don't exist, even if they don't exist, if the possibility they might exist happens, well then I give them my loving friendliness or my limitless goodwill too. It doesn't, does it affect the practice in one way or another? Like, are we worried about like devas? And devas are what we call deities. These are beings that there's various levels. There's devas that live in trees, just kind of like elves and all these kind of things of ancient mythology. And there's devas that live in heaven realms and all these kind of things. And there's devas that supposedly protect people. So if you're ever walking along these paths at night and you feel scared or something like that, there might be a deva there that's trying to protect you from animals. Who knows? But so I mean, I can't say I can only talk about what the Buddha taught in the suttas, in the teachings. And he taught that it's part of right view that there are all kinds of different beings, and it's not that hard of a jump for me as somebody who loves astronomy and who can only imagine what kind of beings there exist in this universe, to think that, hey, who knows, there might be beings that we can't see. I don't know. Whether they exist or not doesn't really change my practice. But in a way, kind of, I think having an open mind about these things helps with your practice in general. Having an open mind is important, because in this practicing, you're questioning everything that you think is true. You're questioning even the idea that there's a permanent self. So if you don't have an open mind, as soon as you read, there's no permanent self, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not going to follow this practice, right? But if you have an open mind, you say, well, okay, I don't know, but I'll practice and see where it leads out. So. Now, one thing I will say is, though, in Theravada Buddhism, in the suttas, all of these beings are pretty much as screwed as we are. They're all in samsara. Even like the highest, like Brahma, like in Hinduism, right? Brahma is the god. He's like the one god that everything came from. In Buddhism, he's part of samsara too. He's a being that all of us could have at one point been a Brahma. And we lived for eons or whatever, and then we passed on according to our karma, and now here we are as humans. So they're all, there's no, you can't pray to them. They're not going to do anything for you or anything like that. But then they're also in, they're in there as well, in samsara. So it's not like, like an eternal omniscient God or anything like that. You mentioned that it's okay to modify your meditation practice to what works for you, as long as it is within the context of what the Buddha taught. If following the breath doesn't lead one to serenity concentration, can one choose a different object? Also, does it matter which posture is used? Yeah, you can use a different object, for sure. One thing I will say is that for the majority of my practice, I didn't follow the breath. I told you that, in the beginning, I had a lot of struggles with my breath, and I still do. I'm a lot better at it. I think there's a lot of issues with my breath related to having severe asthma and allergies as a child, and I still have some asthma and allergies today. So for the far majority of my practice, I was essentially what you would call a dry vipassana practitioner. And that does exist in the suttas. There were monks at the time of the Buddha that didn't do jhana and that didn't follow the breath and all that kind of stuff. They just totally did the four foundations of mindfulness and observing their body. And there's monks today that do that. It's there. It's not necessarily what the Buddha recommended because it's supposedly a lot harder. But for me, it was a big part of my practice. Now, of course, that practice also kind of led me to following my breath too, because it's interesting because you do develop a concentration when you practice just Vipassana. It's not as deep a concentration as if you practice it together with Samatha. But one day I'm just sitting there just observing whatever comes up in my mind, and all of a sudden I just notice my breath, and it's calm and it's steady, and it's unlike any breath I ever remembered, ever. Because usually, even now, like if I try to breathe, it's hard for me to take a full deep breath because I just have these constrictions and all kinds of gunk and everything. And I said, wow, what is this? This is like amazing. Like I'm not controlling my breath. It just came out of nowhere. And ever since then, and also reading the suttas and things like that, I decided to change, my practice to concentrating on my breath. Especially because I think because it's been such a hindrance for me, I think it's also been one of my greatest teachers. So no, you don't have to, if the breath is something that you have a hard time with, you can, change your object if you're aware of the different objects. Metta is also a samatha practice. You can, use metta to get into the jhanas. That's something I haven't been very successful in, so I can't really talk to you too much more about that. But there are very prominent monastics that is their practice. They practice metta as their object. And the posture, I don't think the posture makes a difference. It's more about being able to be stable and comfortable for long periods of time. There's two aspects to being a meditator who can, you all get jealous over because you look at them and they're like a rock for like an hour. Right? You're like, well, what's going on with that? I can never be like that. There's two aspects to that. One is to have the mind that is not so bothered by the physical body that every little thing is going to disturb the mind. The other thing is to have a body that is going to be able to be at least marginally comfortable for a long period of time. So whatever posture that you can find that you're going to be comfortable in for a long period of time is fine to meditate in. You often hear about like lotus and half lotus and all this stuff. Well, the reason why lotus is probably the best posture is because it's so stable. And because if you're able to do it, I don't know if it's comfortable. Even most people I know who can do lotus even say that they can't really do it for like a long, long period of time. That it does get uncomfortable after a while. But it's more about being comfortable. Some of my deepest meditation in terms of concentration and like jhanic-like concentration and stuff like that, flirting around the jhanas, has been actually at my chair at my desk when I was working as a layperson. I wasn't sitting cross-legged in the woods somewhere. I was in my office. So it's more important about stability and comfort than the specific type of posture. The concept of enlightenment feels similar to the concept of heaven, and the reframing of our present reality to be a reality of suffering, similar to the concept of hell. Like many religions, if we do not live by its code of morals, we are doomed, and if we abide, we are saved. To me, this feels unnecessary and even actively harmful. Why not use meditation as a vehicle towards acceptance of this world, a world that is rich with both joys and sorrows? Well, as somebody who was raised Catholic, I can talk a little bit about heaven. Heaven is supposedly this, experience, this existence with God and the angels and everybody everybody who you've lost and all of these kind of things. It's this eternal place of eternal bliss and all this kind of stuff. Awakening is not that. It's hard. We can't explain. Even I think Samanera Panyaratana said this yesterday, talking about awakening. It's not something that you can explain, but it's not existence nor non-existence. Right? There's nothing. It's beyond. Heaven is something that we are able to think about because it kind of matches in ways like our understanding of this world, right? Heaven, instead of having to deal with suffering, heaven, there's no suffering, right? So instead of having to deal with this, heaven, we deal with this. An awakening, there's no, you can't compare it because it's just what they call ineffable. It's unexplainable. And it's outside the boundaries of concepts, right? So I don't know if you could even compare the two in that regard. In terms of like suffering and heaven and hell and all that kind of stuff, again, in Buddhism, all that stuff exists. It's true, it exists. There is suttas where the Buddha is basically saying, if you do this, this is your result. If you do that, this is your result. And that can sound very similar to, a priest or a preacher up there saying, you're going to go to hell. And all this kind of stuff. It can sound similar. It's very, the first time I was reading the suttas, and I was like, and the Buddha's, talking, there's a sutta where he's talking about what will happen to you in hell. I'm like, whoa, this reminds me of the Bible. This is weird kind of stuff. But the interesting thing about it is that karma and rebirth is not really supposed to be justice. People think about it like, they'll get theirs in the end, karma will get them. It's not, karma is not some kind of mystical cosmic justice. Karma is simply cause and effect. Karma is, if you do this, this is the fruit, this is what will happen. It's just that. There's no cosmic God or something that's like, they're going to hell, or I'm going to judge them and send them here, send them there. There's none of that. It's just, this is, and I guess that kind of fits in, talking about hell being like this existence now and all this kind of stuff. There are kind of people who take the different realms and kind of view them as mind-made things. Like hell is, you create your own hell, you create your own heaven and all that kind of stuff. In a way you do, whether these realms are totally mind-made or if they exist in reality, who knows? One way or the other, you do experience it, and according to the Buddha, this is what you do, and you can see that just in your daily life. How you act in your daily life, you can see the results of that. If not immediately, at least within this life, you can see. In my job, working with Child Protective Services, and I worked with lots of people who had lots of stuff in their past, lots of stuff, all criminal and this and that, And sometimes I was working with people, and you can tell. When you work with people enough, you really can tell if they really want to change, or if they're changing because you're involved and they have to, kind of thing. And there's some people who you have so much empathy for them because they want to change. They're really trying to make their life better. But every time, like they're trying to make their life better, oh, they got their license back. But then they're driving and then they got pulled over because they had a warrant they forgot from years ago, and then they're in jail again, and then the cycle just goes and goes. And seeing that firsthand, that made me realize, like, wow, like what you do in life really does have an effect. And so, going across lifetime to lifetime is just an extrapolation of that. Using meditation as a vehicle towards acceptance of this world. I don't know if I would say it is a vehicle of acceptance. I think it's a great vehicle of acceptance. It's an acceptance of reality, right? Normally we have delusion. We do not, because of our ignorance, we don't see things as they truly are. And we act in ways that we expect things to happen, and we expect things to be certain ways, and they're not. And the reason why we expect that is because we're not seeing clearly, we're not understanding. So you can, through insight and development of wisdom, you do come to an acceptance and an understanding of human nature, of the world. You understand that this is the world. Now, I wouldn't say that a world that is rich in joys and sorrows, I wouldn't say that you, in this practice, developing this path, there's like, oh yes, this is, a nice world. Yeah, there's things that are bad, but there's also things that are good. You see deeper than that. That's when you start to see deeper than that, that's when the enchantment of the world, so I don't know if it was Bhante Sila or Samanera Panyaratana that talked about dropping the world's bait. Right? When the enchantment for the world is just not there anymore, when you see deeper, when you see beyond the surface, then joys and sorrows, I guess, in a way, are just the same thing, if I'm saying it correctly. I don't know if nothing to be attached to, really. Because they're two sides of the same coin, right? There's not. The Buddha talks about an equanimous mind being the most blissful, right? You have joy and elation, and then you have fear and sorrow and depression. It's kind of like, like before I give a talk, there's always a little nervousness, and there's always like a little and then after I give a talk, I'm like, oh, I like this talk. Like you have this like back and forth, this happiness, sadness. But the joy is going beyond that. The joy is equanimity. The joy is not being part of that roller coaster, having a clear, equanimous mind. That is the greatest joy. If pleasure is dukkha, and all sensations are just sensations without real positive or negative charge, can we condition the mind to enjoy dukkha? I have in my experience, and it's pretty weird. We don't have to. Our mind already enjoys dukkha. That's the whole point of the practice is to to understand dukkha. We already enjoy it. Now, maybe this is kind of talking about like sadomasochism kind of stuff, like where you're like, you enjoy and you love pain and all these kind of things. That's still a craving, right? That's still a dukkha. It's like you attach yourself up to an electrical thing because you want to have pain, and then it's just not painful enough, and you're like, oh, that sucked. I wanted more pain. You know, it's still, it's just a different way of attachment, you know, and craving. It's still craving. Yeah, and it's still dukkha because of our craving. If we had an equanimous mind, a mind that didn't jump to like and dislike, pain, pleasure and pain, then whatever happens to us is just, like you say, just sensations. Okay? It's the extra added levels that we put onto it that causes the problem. There's a wonderful sutta called the simile of the dart or the arrow. I think it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, I'm not sure. But if you just type in the arrow or the dart, you'll find it. And the Buddha's talking about pleasure and pain being like two arrows. Like physical pain is the arrow. You know, you get hit, it's like getting hit with an arrow, right? That's physical pain. Suffering is like getting hit with another arrow. That's mental suffering. We don't have the choice for the pain. Physical pain is physical pain. We have the choice whether we want to take that second arrow and cause ourselves suffering. We don't have to suffer. In modern times, you hear the modern extrapolation of that is pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. If you've heard that one before, right? The Buddha said that 2,600 years ago. So we don't have to, you know, suffer, whether the suffering is because we're not getting our horrible sensations or not. I'm going to try to ask this question again. As a gardener, I do not use pesticides, but I still kill bugs every day, usually one by one between my fingers. Otherwise, many plants would be eaten up. All natural organic farmers, gardeners, do the same or similarly. It's a part of the job. Please share your thoughts on the fact that killing bugs is an integral part of raising food, in light of the Dharma, and what the Buddha has to say about right livelihood. Now, how shall I say this? No matter what you do, the fact that you exist, other beings are dying and suffering because you exist. This is one of the things that, like, when people talk about vegetarianism, right? I don't eat meat. It doesn't matter. Beings are still dying for you to exist. Farmers are killing bugs for you to exist. It's just the way it is. So beings are going to suffer and die just because you exist, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, what you can do is try not to intentionally kill beings. That's what you can try to do. You know, this is a tough question, because this is essentially, you know, this person is questioning their livelihood, or you know, what they're, even if it's not what they do for a living, they're you know, this is something that they obviously enjoy doing. I mean, not necessarily killing the bugs, but farming and all this kind of stuff. And this is not an easy answer. You know, we can, you know, everybody can say killing is bad. Okay. And then you have to make the decision on your own, right? I mean, there really, as far as I've ever read in the suttas, there's no justification for any kind of killing. It is simple as that. Now, there's obviously different levels of, you know, there's, you know, for instance, there's a rule about monks that, you know, if they're being attacked, they can, like, defend themselves as long as they're not trying to, you know, really, really harm or kill a person, like these kind of things. The intention is not to kill. Now, it might happen, but the intention is not to kill. So it's really, this is not an easy question, because this is, nobody can say up there, stand up here and say, quit your job so you don't kill beings. It has to be something that you feel like you need to do in your own practice. Right? This is another thing about taking responsibility for your own practice. It's human nature. It's easier for us to say, this person is an authority, this person says this. It's easier for us to do that than it is to look at ourselves and to really examine the situation and to do this and to make our own decisions. If you feel okay with, taking on the karma of killing bugs, well then, if that doesn't, give you that strong, intense desire to change, then you're just not there yet. Then, continue to do what you do. Some people, with vegetarianism and stuff like that, they feel like, every Buddhist, when you get to a certain point, you would definitely be a vegetarian. How could you not be? I've never been a vegetarian. I don't think it changed my practice at all. I don't think it harmed my practice. Now, technically, I'm a vegetarian here because this is what we eat, vegetarian. But, monks, wherever we go, whatever we're fed is, what we eat. So I've had meat as a monk before. It's just the way it is. So for me, it's not, and there's a lot of, I don't even want to get into that debate because it's just crazy. But, I don't know. I don't know what else to say to that. We're getting close to time and I'm being very slow. So, let's see how many. This is not me. Neso hamamsi, what I put on the board over there. Similarly, in Hinduism, Shiva says, Aham nivikalpo nirakara. Let's keep it going. Okay. He doesn't have form. He is a form of pure bliss. I don't have hatred or this is not a question. At least I don't think it is. I don't see it created, unless somebody was trying to write another piece of paper. What would you recommend as an intro step to mindfulness for angry teens? This is my livelihood. Oh, I dealt with a lot of angry teens in my day too. Sometimes they ask why I don't get angry back at them. I have a difficult time explaining compassion. What would help? I loved working with teenagers. The reason why I loved working with teenagers is because, in my job I worked a lot, there's, young children as well. But the reason I love working with teenagers is because they actually can say, F you, go away. I love that. I love the ability, there's a being that you can talk to, a being that you can, interact with. So for me, working with teenagers was always a very fun, but also very challenging experience. And I worked with lots of angry teens. Lots of angry teens, anger at their mother, at their school, at the system in general, at me. It's just, part of that teenage angst kind of thing. When it comes to children, trying to get them to do any kind of meditation or mindfulness is not necessarily something that can be forced. If they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. It's as simple as that. The only thing I guess I could say is try to think of ways that would help them become a little bit more introspective. I guess, for instance, in this situation, they get angry at me, but I don't get angry back. You have a difficult time explaining compassion. In a situation like that, one of the things you could try to do is, if they have a trust for you, if they have, if you do have a decent relationship with them, you can say, well, when they're in a mood, when you're not getting angry back, you're de-escalating a situation, something that I did all the time in my job. There's lots of high-pressure stuff. And escalating the situation, getting angry back at the person is escalating the situation. You want to de-escalate. So when you're de-escalating, you can, try to put their focus, instead of anger outside, try to see if you can ask them, like, well, how does, remember when we talked about anger, how are you, how is your mind right now? How is your body, what are you feeling in your body right now? These kind of things. And they might say, I'm feeling this way, go F off, or whatever. That's just the way it is. But, you never know what kind of little idea that you can implant in them, and that, maybe they're still angry, so they're not going to think about it then, but maybe later they'll think about, wow, this person, was calm, and they asked me this question, and you know what? I did kind of feel this way. I did kind of feel that way. So it's something that they can reflect on later. I guess in terms of explaining compassion, the easiest way to do that is to say, would you like it if I punched you in the face? Or would you like it if I did this to you or did that to you? Well, nobody likes that. We all don't like that. So if you can understand that you don't like it and you don't want somebody to harm you, then you can understand why you would have compassion towards somebody else. You don't want to harm them. I'll leave it up to you guys. Do you want to go over time doing some more questions, or do you want to end? It's up to you guys. Okay. Wouldn't it be best for us to avoid encouraging others to break sila, accumulate bad karma, or practice wrong livelihood? Yeah, that's good. Don't encourage people to do that. For example, if we hire an exterminator, or if we purchase or consume animal products we are not killing. Oh boy, this is part of the whole vegetarian thing that I didn't want to start getting into. Oh man, we are not killing, but we are encouraging others to kill, to practice wrong livelihood. You're going to hear different things depending on the different traditions. I'm just going to say that flat out. From the Nikayas, from the Pali Canon and Theravada, you are not encouraging the exterminator to kill bugs. That's their intention. That's their decision. Now, I guess what I will say though is, getting the exterminator to come in and kill bugs, that's still not necessarily getting you off the hook either. That's still, like in the monks' rules, right? We can't kill somebody, obviously, but we also can't say, go and take care of this guy for me. You can all, there's doing the action, and there's also kind of, taking part in it. You're not doing it yourself, but you're taking part in it. So technically, the karma for the exterminators is their karma, and yours is yours. So, and of course, this is extremely like, if you have a family and you have a bed bug, a thing, or lice or anything like that, well, how do you not kill and also take care of your family at the same time? Nobody can give you a good answer to that. And of course, everybody will try. Try this way of non-harming these beings and trying to get them away. Try this way. There's lots of ways that you can try to not harm a being, but also get rid of the bugs. Sometimes those won't work. Sometimes, you have to kind of balance out You know, your family's safety versus your karma. It's not easy. There's no easy choice in samsara. It's just the way it is. You know, people, when we talk about the precepts of not killing, that's one that often comes up. What if I have to call it an exterminator? It's a practice, right? It's not a commandment. You do your best. You can only do your best with where you are in your practice. And, you know, if you take on karma, then don't make it worse for yourself. Don't overly judge yourself and make, you know, and make your life even worse. You can understand, well, maybe there might have been a more wise way of doing this. I don't know it yet, but maybe there would have been. And then if you know that wise way later, then you do it that way, you share. And also, you know, in Theravada Buddhism, this whole thing of purchasing animal products, that's not, your intention is to purchase a product for its use. Your intention is not to harm a living being. So you are not directly harming a living being. It's not part of your karma. It's as simple as that. I'll give you an example of this. The Buddha allowed monks to eat meat. But he allowed monks to eat meat with certain conditions. Monks can eat meat as long as they did not see, hear, or understand that the animal was killed directly for them. Now, of course, today, people who are vegan or vegetarian will say, the fact that you go to the store and you buy meat means that you are part of the demand. And if there's no demand, then there's no supply. Which is true. But your intention is not to kill an animal. Your intention is to feed yourself and your family. So there's no intention of harming there. And of course, a lot of people just won't take that. That's not they can't see it that way, and that's fine. But this is how it is from the suttas and in this tradition. Generally speaking, how does right livelihood apply to children? I don't mean should they get jobs. Well, some children are like 30 years old and still living at home with no jobs, right? So they should probably get jobs. Also, what are your thoughts on how youth sports don't align with Buddhist principles? You know, when it comes to children, I think one of the good things about, in terms of right livelihood, in terms of the Noble Eightfold Path, and in terms of Buddhism in general, is I kind of understand, we kind of have this feeling that, you know, children are children. Like we have this, just like we have this feeling that this is me, I am me. This is my child. You know, it came out of my body, or I was part of creating this child. This is my child. And so, in doing so, we kind of develop lots of expectations for that child. You know, we expect this child, you know, I have my first boy. He's going to love sports just like I did. And then he grows up and he can't stand sports. That happened with me and my father, by the way. My father played baseball semi-professionally. I just never big into sports. You know, and of course he kind of suffered for that because, you know, that was his expectation. That, you know, boys like sports. I like video games better. So, I mean, if I had a kid, I would be like, oh, come on, son, let's play video games. Nah, I'd rather go out and play baseball. Oh, man. You know, so it's one of those things. So it's about, you know, expectations. Really, what your job is, you know, your job as a parent is to do the best that you can to teach the child skills of living a wise and skillful life. Right? That's really the job of a parent. I will say off the top of my head that I am not a parent, although the last 10 years before I came and became a monk, I lived and helped raise my nephew from the time he was 1 to the time he was 11 when I left. And so I was essentially the father figure. And I do understand, that led me to a lot of understanding of what parents go through. But obviously he's not my child, although he's my nephew, but still, you know, so I guess that also allowed me to be a little bit detached from it too, because he wasn't, you know, I was able to not necessarily put my own expectations on him, just kind of teach him what it is to live in this world in a good way, to be a good person, you know, to have the skills to you know, thrive in the world. Youth sports. I don't see how sports, I mean, sports are sports. I don't think it really has anything to do one way or the other with Buddhist principles per se. You know, I think, again, it's all about intention, right? One of the things I loved, and obviously I played sports. I played years of baseball. I played even football in high school and stuff like that. I wasn't really into it, but I played it. But one of the things I actually loved about the sports was just the fun of going out and playing. You know, you know, just the enjoyment of doing it, of working the body, you know, and even working the mind a little bit. Now, if it turns into, you know, oh, Johnny's on an away team now, and we have to practice this many hours a day, we have to do this, and we have to do that, and it turns into this, oh, and Johnny's going to get a scholarship, and then I won't have to go to this horrible old folks home, and all these kind of things. If it turns into all of it, it's about the intention. You know, if it turns into this big thing with full of expectations, then it's not going to be helpful to the child. You know, I saw the first time I experienced this thing, like with my nephew and stuff, my sister's like, oh, he has a play date, or like we have a schedule, we schedule to like go and play at this. Wait, I mean, they're not in a league, but it's just people you're scheduling for them to go play somewhere. Like, what happened to just going out in the neighborhood and playing, and all these kind of things, you know? So it's like, it's interesting today how we are with kids, and I think they deserve a little bit more freedom and a lot less expectations, really. You know, that doesn't mean, obviously, we don't let them run wild. You still have to discipline them. That part of teaching them how to be a good citizen and a good person is disciplining them as well, and not being just their friend, but their parent. That's another thing I saw a lot over these days. I want my child to be my friend. I don't want to make them mad at me. Whenever the subject of a thought or a sentence is I, it is a useless thought. Is this thought true? No. One of the things that people kind of get wrapped up in when they start learning about not self and all this, it's like, you know, you see people that will say like, these 5 aggregates are hungry. Like it's almost like, those of you who are old enough, like you remember Bob Dole, like Bob Dole says this. You're like talking about like in the third person, right? So it'll be like, these 5 aggregates are quite tired. Like it's so silly. There's a conventional world, and there's convention, and there's beyond convention, beyond concepts. You know, the practice leads to beyond convention and beyond concepts. But if I was to become an awakened being and I came back and I was like, I am beyond concepts, I can't teach you people, see you later. No, like the Buddha used I, the Buddha used me, the Buddha used, this is, you know, using these, using words to convey teaching and convey experience to people is important. You have to be able to do that. One of my favorite monks, Ajahn Chah, talked about you have to be a master of the conventional and the unconventional. You have to be able to see deeply, but also explain the teachings to people in such a way that they understand it, and at every level. The Buddha was great at that. You can, to be able to, I don't know if it was Einstein or somebody, with the internet these days, you don't know who says the quote, but it's something about, when you know something, you're able to teach it to like a 5-year-old or something like that. When you really know something, you're able to teach it in a way that anybody can understand it. And you need all these words to be able to teach that. It's not the word, it's the attachment. It's the attachment to I, to this self. The word is just a word. It's just an utterance out of my vocal cords. What are the conditions that make my foot or the thing I feel when I walk not me? Does this have something with the 5 aggregates? Could you break it down? Well, this is pretty easy because there's nothing that is you. There's nothing, the Buddha says. Now, while the Buddha refused to say there is no self or there is a self, when people asked him that question, he refused to answer. What he did say was, whatever you look at is not self. Whatever you can look at in your own experience, you're not going to find a self there, a permanent, unabiding self. So when you're walking, and when you're doing this thing, I learned this, Bhante Sila taught me this at a retreat almost 4 years ago. So when he started talking, I was like, I remember this. This is interesting stuff. And this is from the suttas. This is the essentially 6 factors. And what I wrote up there is the 3 characteristics of existence, and what the Buddha talked when he talked about observe whatever you can see. Truly understanding it, you truly understand that this is not mine. The foot is not yours. Is it yours? Yes, you can will yourself to lift the foot, but, or you can will yourself to do whatever with your body. And so we think that we have a power over it, that it's ours. This is my body. I'm pointing, right? But then when the body gets sick, or when the body dies, or when, the body gets old, you can't say, well, don't get old. Come on. I command you not to get old. No. You can't control. You have limited control. You have an illusion of control. But the body is following a path. The body was born. The body was, born out of the union of your parents. The body grew up in the womb. The body was, came out of the womb. The body grew up, learned how to walk. The body is, getting taller. And then the body's getting shorter because it's getting hunched over. And then you need a cane. And then you drop dead. That you have no control over that system. So the Buddha says, if it really was yours, you'd be able to say, don't be like that. But you can't, because it's not. And so that's what, when you're, anything that comes up in your experience, you're applying these 6 factors is applying, understanding that everything that you're going to have in your experience is impermanent. It's coming up, it's also going to go away. It's not going to, it's always going to change. Everything is, and if you attach to it, you're going to make yourself suffer. And it's also of the nature to not have a permanent self. And so that's really the main, and as a matter of fact, when we talk about Vipassana, that is actually what you're seeing. When you're seeing with insight in Buddhism, you are seeing the 3 characteristics of existence. You're seeing that all phenomena, all conditioned phenomena, and everything's conditioned except for Nibbana, is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. Everything. You can't experience anything that isn't. So, and the 5 aggregates are all of the above: impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. Practice of martial arts allows one to release natural feeling of anger and violence constructively and mindfully. Is this thought true? Yeah, I would say it's true. Although I wouldn't say it's the absolute best way. I think as you practice, you'll find other ways of doing that. That you don't have to release the anger outward. You can let it go inward, right? So that's, I think, one of the main reasons why monks don't, well, with the exception of Shaolin monks and stuff like that, we're not going out there practicing kung fu and stuff like that. I used to do kung fu. Actually, it's one of the things I kind of miss. I loved kung fu, but I didn't do it for releasing anger or violence, but I did. Actually, the style I did was one of those styles that it could be extremely violent, but you also didn't have to harm anybody either. You could disable somebody without harming them. So, and it was very meditative as well. So, I think martial arts is a good thing as long as you do it with a good intention. And the last one. Sexual attraction can never be completely extinguished. Only its desire can be eradicated. This is why the precepts only forbid sexual misconduct. Is this thought accurate? Yes, it can be extinguished. Now, that doesn't happen until you're pretty much towards the end of becoming an awakened being. I believe it's once you are a non-returner, then there's no more. So until that point, you're going to have it. Now, I guess, let me. Sexual attraction, in terms of just thinking of it as a evolutionary aspect. Obviously, males and females have to be attracted to each other so that the species can propagate. So, would an enlightened being look at somebody of whatever sex they're attracted to and notice features? Maybe they would feel, oh, gee, no, this is, I don't want to, that's an interesting question. In general, I would say no. Once it's extinguished, there's just no. I guess it would be. I was going somewhere, but I don't think that. I don't think it could be any different than what I was trying to say here. The reason why the precepts only say sexual misconduct is because lay people are not trying to be celibate. And a lot of what we're doing here, why do we do the precepts? We do the precepts for our own benefit. But the precepts are all related to how our interactions with other people, aren't they? Right? No killing, no stealing, no lying. If you were the only being in existence, who would you kill? Who would you steal? Who would you lie to? Right? So, in a way, so obviously, sexual misconduct is any kind of activity that is harmful to yourself and others. And some, things like adultery can be harmful to the society in general, or at least the local groups. So. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Okay, friends, well, it took an extra half hour, but we're done. So.